Hey there, oozes and slimes.
Welcome to another episode of Campaign Spotlight. I'm Production Master Riley.
And I'm Dungeon Inspector Jake. This week, we're chatting with Jake, no relation, who's an experienced DM with some great stories.
In this episode, we'll be talking about building a meaningful, long-term campaign experience with your players over many years.
This is definitely something that's been on my mind as some of my long-term players have moved away, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it. Check out the show notes for this episode for links to the animated cutscenes Jake describes.
Let's roll initiative.
We open on a slowly spinning orb, mostly blue with some green and brown on top. It doesn't look like much, but upon closer inspection you'll recognize it as the planet Eos, a vibrant and chaotic world at the center of all life in the realmscape. Across the planet, walled city-states have slowly transformed into sprawling urban nations, each its own mystical metropolis carved into the face of a world that has been destroyed and rebuilt more times than any historian can recall. In a magical society where apocalyptic 10th level spells get narrowly thwarted on time each year, it was only a matter of time before someone finally figured out how to actually destroy the world with magic, by commoditizing it. The year is 1395 in the Age of Discovery, and though sword and sorcery still holds a powerful sway over this planet's destiny, a new era of history built on gunsmoke and graphical interface has begun to dawn. Gone are the days of adventurers swapping potions for sending stones. These days, young people only care about swapping party drugs for eye stones. Much of this progress has been spurred on by Grax Althor, the world's first multinational corporation, whose CEO Ganymede Grax promises to help create a safer world with his monopoly of magitech. His inventions have brought the wonders of electricity and plumbing to cities across the world, even out to cramped tenement houses and back alleys in the slums. But amidst all that wonder, with each passing day, ancient wizard towers are knocked down to make way for the glass skyscrapers designed by elves and built by giants. Family businesses like Fletcher's and fruit stands go under when faced with the convenient comforts of conspicuous consumption provided by Draco's department store. For all the advances society has made during this age of discovery, the divide between the haves and have-nots still festers beneath the surface, a wound unhealing, older than time itself. Despite all this rapid development, there are still places where people can seek a fresh start. Far off in the outlands of eastern Eldura, a nation of drow men has risen up from the living hell of the Underdark, freeing themselves from the oppression of the Gothic Dominion and their tyrannical matriarchy. This nation of free men has fallen under the banner of a shadowy figure known only through whispers as Daddy. Using the ancient magic of the Black Moon of Aram, he promises them a new world of ultimate freedom. Further south in the outlands lies a small city, lifted up from the ashes and rebuilt by a community of nomadic tiefling families. Even nestled in a wasteland of barren hills, this city of Nomford bustles with life and activity. For all the unforgiving harshness around them, the people of Nomford, whether they be lawmen or outlaws, seek to lift one another up to a place of prosperity, one that can be shared for the common good. For good or ill, a city once known as a den of thieves has become a place where no matter the circumstances of one's birth or one's life, you are treated as an equal. Hidden away in the slums of Old Nomford, the soft glow of lights tangles with the din of far-off chatter spreading through the nearby alleyways. As you follow this siren call of activity, past the drifters and the drug dealers, you eventually find its source. This rickety old saloon has been sitting empty until just a few months ago, but now serves as the beating heart of a brand new community. As you approach the swinging saloon doors, you are overwhelmed by the scent of exotically seasoned, family-style Tex-Mex food, only for the piercing scent of fresh squeezed lime juice to draw your sight to the round of margaritas sitting atop the bar in the back. This bar is backlit by the otherworldly neon glow of the massive sign bearing this establishment's name. Tabitha Zilton's Fajito Roundup. Turning back around, you take in your surroundings for the first time. Catfolk, merfolk, birdmen, dark elves, and goblins. People from all walks of life gathering together for something more than just a stiff drink and a fresh churro. Most of them are friends, a few of them lovers, and some are even once sworn enemies, until the arcane forces of time and understanding wove together their broken bonds once more. The proprietor of this establishment, Miss Tabitha Zilton herself, finishes pouring the latest rounds of margs, and walks around the bar to serve her companions. Two black blurs whoosh past you in tandem, as Munis Whiskerly and October Tengu dash to their drinks before anyone else. The pair of chaotic charlatans Preston Caviar and Suplex Hammerthorn rudely push you out of the way to get their drinks, noses freshly powdered. Finally, the last drink floats magically off the tray, into the air, past you down the aisle, into the dramatically outstretched hands of Rolo Vryn. The dashing shadow sorcerer has made quite a name for himself opening the Vryn Academy of Mystical Arts, just up the street. But after a long day of shaping young minds, a night of taproom therapy with his pals is exactly what he'd hoped for. You're probably asking yourself, shouldn't they be working on a plan to defeat this dreaded daddy? Or confronting the specters of their dark and traumatic backstories? Surely there must be a loot-filled dungeon nearby in need of clearing, right? Maybe. But as these six friends gather around the bar, a small crowd of chattering activity begins to swell around them. Friends of friends share a quick joke, while others talk through the never-ending struggles of a life lived on the fringes of normalcy. So sure, one day they might actually decide to get up off their asses and save the world. Hell, maybe they'll save the whole damn universe if they have the time. But until then, they'll be here living life in the moment, surrounded by the people they love. Who are these people? They are the Monster Bros.
Welcome to Campaign Spotlight. Do you mind introducing yourself and telling us how you got into tabletop games?
So thank you for having me, first of all. My name is Jake Sullivan. I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm originally from the city of Philadelphia, which comes up, just like all people from there, it comes up a lot in everything. My experience with tabletop games, I feel like aside from tabletop, I think when I was a younger kid, I obviously loved like Final Fantasy and, a very like video game RPG kind of a background. So in high school, a friend of mine invited me to come to her brother's, this new campaign that he was starting. It was my friend Harley and her brother, our DM was Rafe. Shout out to them. But yeah, it was really cool. Like their dad played D&D, and like another player, Nate, on our team, like his dad played in that same. It was like a decades-long campaign. So like they always had like all the old books, and so like our game had like all these very like sort of old school like AD&D, and like I to this day I tried to message him on Instagram, but I don't know if he's checked his DMs in a while. I was hoping I would know, but like I think actually the system we were using wasn't even D&D. I think it was like a homebrew kind of a thing that he had put together. Like we used all like D10s. It was I want to run a game of it so bad at some point. But yeah, it was just like, I mean, it was kind of like your classical D&D thing. We would play for like 4 or 5 hours on a Saturday, Cheetos, Mountain Dew. I cannot remember the name of my first character. He was an Angel Man who died of dick-related injuries. But he was eventually replaced by a werefox rogue named Ziggy, who I was constantly followed by my giant fire ant companion, Aunt Gertrude. And the cliffhanger that our high school campaign ended on, I lost Gertrude to the void, and it has affected me emotionally to this day. So it was just like a really like very full like totally like, you know, the sort of stuff that they try to capture on like Stranger Things and whatnot, like, you know, where it's just murder hobos and everybody's dying, like people are turning giant, things are lighting on fire. You know, there's a lot of like, we had like worlds that were, you know, based on like Final Fantasy VI and Castlevania. It was just like, you know, I think that as you'll probably see as I explain mine, I definitely bring a lot of that style where it's like, you know, I do love to sort of like a harsh, weird, emotional edge to something that is kind of based in extremely like goofy and lighthearted things. And so, yeah, I'm forever grateful to the Falkoffs, Harley and Ray, for introducing me to that. That was in high school. And then once high school ended, you know, everybody goes away. I did not play D&D like at all in the in-between until I moved here to Portland like 7 or 8 years ago. I think it was like in 2014. But one of my friends here, Lonnie, saw a meme about D&D, and he's like, we should play. And I was like, I know D&D. That's a lie. It was very, very ambitious of me. Glad I did. Oh, and we played sort of a campaign in D&D 3.5 with a lot of insane homebrew. I was just like, you know, my friend Jackson's character, Grack, was a druid and had reincarnate, and of course I'm like, I want to kill people so that I can see what reincarnate does. So like everybody got a reincarnation eventually. You know, it was total murder hobo mayhem. There was time travel, but you know, that and the campaign that we played after that, it was sort of 2 separate campaigns with different the same players but different characters, but that was across like 3 years. Sort of all formed the basis of like the story and like all the world that I've put into my current campaign, which started like 4 years ago. But anyway, that's my long character backstory that I've just woven for you.
I love this, and I realize it's kind of off topic, so I'm not going to ask about how the Angel Man died of dick-related injuries. But
we can circle back. We can circle back.
Well, yeah. If we have time at the end, let's circle back on the Angel Man's dick. And also, you are not the only guest this season from Philly, and you are also not the only guest to mention Red Up Top. So I'm from Philadelphia.
Yes, that's what we do. It's what we do. That's what we do. Yeah, when Mayor of Easttown came out, I was just like, it's any excuse to be like, wow. But yeah.
Right, I mean, most of us had only seen, like, there's a documentary about running a bar there, and that's most of our exposure to it, I think.
Exactly. And, you know, I bring a lot of that to my, like, the Fajita Roundup bar that I mentioned in my thing is, obviously based off of the Stevie Nicks Fajita Roundup SNL skit joke. I won't bother you with that long strand, but, you know, it's funny the way that, like, now that our adventures start, like a lot of them start very much like in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode, where they're all at the bar getting drunk and wasted, and someone slams in the door like, anyway, guys, we got an adventure. So, you know, I think not just my past back home with tabletop gaming, but just like the spirit of being a loud and weird and chaotic Philadelphian definitely is suffused through everything I've done in D&D.
It really sounds like it from your intro. Tell us a little bit more about this campaign and, you know, what happens after someone bursts into the Fajita Roundup with a plot hook.
Yes, exactly. You know, this one definitely, because one thing that's different from like my older campaigns and like the one I first started in is like, you know, back in the day, like it would be 4 or 5 hour long sessions. Like, oh yeah, like, you know, everybody, it doesn't matter, pen and paper, like you're just there all day long. And, you know, when you were a kid, that was so easy. When I was in my mid-20s, you know, we would, like, go out, party, go to the club, and then, like, be hungover inside one of our friends' house all day. So it was like, why don't we just, like, angrily play D&D for, like, 5 hours? You know, I had a lot more time, and everybody had a lot more attention to do it. You know, something that I try to do now when someone, like, is new to the game is, like, really, like, streamline the experience. I tend to be, like, very hands-on. You know, it's a hard balance because you don't want to be controlling and you want to make sure people have agency. But I I do a lot of prep for newer players, and this was something that for this campaign, I wanted to have really full characters, so that people could have the experience of a full character arc, not just they can do murder hobo stuff, they certainly still do, but I want them to walk in with an idea of who that character bursting into the Fajita Roundup is, and what their general intention is, and I can throw 5 different weird NPCs at them, and the personality of these characters is, even if it's just a heightened version of themselves, that people are sort of it's a rich enough character dynamic that they know how to react to something, because I think in the past, especially I had a lot of chaotic fun, but there was definitely a dearth of role playing. There's 1 or 2 people who wanted to and would do some of it, and then 5 other people being I will stab you for that treasure. I will stab you for that treasure.
Right, you don't just want murder hobos going around out of character. You want them to be committed to be living those roles.
Yeah, commit to the bit. It's my number one slogan. It's all right, is your character... And I have some serial killer characters, some crack addicted characters. So I always, it's there's a lot of people in my friend group who clearly have some things going on with them. At least I should say their characters did those things. Maybe they also did. I don't know. But another thing that really helped is that I don't really play with randos. It's a great way to meet people, and I think it brings a totally different energy to it. But my games are really important to me, and it's a fun story that I build that's supposed to be for making memories. These things in your imagination. It's it should be, if I approach these games I'm making an episode of TV, I'm making an anime I love. We'll get into all my Naruto based nonsense later, I'm sure. But I want it to be able to become a memory that even if we were just blah blah blah, not being super I love Critical Role, but they're actors in the moment Lawrence of Arabia, that the memory of the choices that they made, they felt the choices that they made were honored, whether it was big scale or in the moment, and that it feels a piece of themselves is inside of that enough where, it feels it's something that happened to them. And so, that's why this game has been going on for 4, maybe 5 years now, with long gaps sometimes. Different people have different gaps too because of the nature of things. But even still, it's remember that time? Remember that time that Preston bought an ounce of Zoop and began selling drugs to people in the street corners when he was supposed to go meet his warlock patron, and it's ha ha ha, and to see and how those threads now 5 years later are still drastically in play. It's I think because of the strength of the characters and being able to go in and tell people it's this is what I want, and we'll definitely screw around, we'll definitely joke around. But I want you to commit to the bit, even if it's all just a funny haha joke, play it through to its end. And so I think, back to It's Sunny in Philadelphia, that's the shows like that where it's let's take this, they take this weird little idea and then they just inject themselves into it terribly, like monsters. And then, by the end of the episode, it's well, we did the thing we wanted to do. It seems like several people died, oh well, and then they move on to the next thing as if nothing, and then the joy of just in things like that a year later being no, actually here are the consequences of your actions. So that one was like many things, and this will be a long ramble, but that's kind of the energy, very character focused, episodic. If we only get a chance to play 3 sessions in a row, I want those 3 sessions to be a little nugget, an episode in their mind. And then, when we do 6 months later play again, it's oh, here's something new now.
And it really sounds like that approach has sustained this campaign a long time, because 5 years is just an incredible length to be playing with the same people.
Yes. Yeah. And, people have moved, people go to school. I think I learned early on, it's anybody who runs games knows it's scheduling is the worst thing on planet Earth. Oh my God. it fills me with so much dread to this day. And I've gotten about as good as a process as I can with these people. It's like a lot of my crew are gay men and not just like me, and I just know us. We're late. We're always 10 minutes late to everything. We've always double scheduling things. Saturday night, it's like, let's do that on Saturday. Like, no, this is not going to happen on a Saturday night. There's a lot of reality that you have to deal with. My second campaign got right up, it was really right at the end. And even though these people are all still my best friends and everything, they were just burnt out. It was just suddenly only one person was ever really available to play. And it was like, okay, this is over. And that was a hard lesson to learn. I took it, I didn't try not to lash out or anything, but you take things like that personally when they're important to you. And you have to really work through it. So something, besides all the fantastical story writing stuff, another goal of mine for this was I need to be able to, this needs to be reality tested. Some friends are a little flakier with scheduling. I love you all, but a little harder to nail down. Some people, like I said, they get busy. But I always go in with this understanding, and I say it. It's I appreciate the fact that we don't always get to play, and we kind of have to hop in, and you can't really remember X, Y, and Z thing that happened. But you guys suspend your disbelief, and you're committed in the long run that whenever you can play with me, and we get that chance, you're in there. And it's again, it's you're totally committed. It's I know who this Tabitha Zilton and Preston Caviar are. I know who they are in my head, even if I can't remember, the person we're murdering right now. Oh, oops, we shouldn't have paused there, I guess. But it's they figure it out. And every time it's I'm how was that guy? Oh, sorry that happened. So overly apologetic. I'm Jake, that's the funniest thing on planet Earth. And it's very nice the way that people, no matter what's going on in the world, especially through 2020, find a way to make you feel appreciated for all the work you put into it. So it's, that's one of the reasons why it's I can take my chance with random people. That's totally a thing. But hard enough to find people in a friend group who can appreciate you and be committed to things like that. So that's one of the things why I take that part, the reality of the situation, the human element, very seriously.
And it sounds in particular you've really let people kind of hop in and out based on their availability over the years. And, through a plague and everything that's happened during your campaign.
Yeah. Ironically, the terrible plague that was an awful thing that happened was the best and most successful period of D&D story progression. I got a lot done. That was a crazy time of transition. That was when, this 6-person team is, of characters have been mostly split into 3 separate groups, and playing at totally different times for different stretches of months, playing at different stretches of times for, different periods. You have to you do have to find a way to sort of pull it all together. Cause it's, when you do get to that point where it's all right, let's mix the teams, it does become, a double whammy of okay, playing D&D with 6 people versus 3 people is harder. The balance goes way off. My first campaign was 6 or 7 players, God bless Matthew Mercer. To commit to doing that many players for all those years, logistical nightmare. I don't care what anybody says about the way he plays or anything. That is, that game is made for 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 players at least. And so that was one of the things where it's this is going so great, partially because each team has 3 people, and so it's if one person is available, we got it's a 2-player, and they get to sort of have a little buddy cop sort of adventure on their own, and I haven't done them a ton because I feel you have to have a pretty good idea for them. But 1-player, I just did a 1-player adventure while my friend John, who plays the character October, he was just in college, and we're all in our 30s, but when you're 30 and in college, bad enough when I was in my 20s. So I kept playing with the players of Tabitha and Preston, all, continuing this storyline. And it was like, you're just in the background. You're doing some other sort of a side mission. We'll figure it out. And then once he had the time, coincidentally, when those other two were hard to schedule, it was like perfect. And we did. It was, I found a little way with I use Foundry Virtual Tabletop to run my games in, especially my distance ones. And I managed to put together like a sort of Metal Gear Solid sneaking mission. He had an NPC buddy, so it was one of those things where it was one player, but like, he's controlling two different characters on this battle map. He's going to like play as a new character, like, it's finding any way. And it was like, he's like, these are some of the most fun sessions I've ever played. Like, and it was like awesome because like number one fear, it's like, two people hanging out on a Zoom call and like one of them's like reading a soliloquy and the other person's bored out of their mind, like, ugh. So it was one of those things where it's like, I could have just been like, well, sorry, you can't play, you'll catch up with us later. But instead putting a little more effort into it, was able to instead, like, it's like, all right, here's what you're going to do, and you're going to help this story in this way I didn't think before. And that's another way that I like to try and, like, the story is supposed to be sort of this changing thing where I don't really know how it ends, and like, the choices that the players make have to like affect it. And there's obvious stuff where like, I did kill the king or I saved the king. But I like how, I'm a big David Lynch fan. I love like, big Evangelion fan. I love when like the circumstances of real life sort of shift the narrative of a story. And there's all these things that have happened now from that sort of 3-session, 1-player game, that just because, he was too busy to play originally, there's just these cool new elements that have like spawned out of that. So it's like trying to find, it's like it's important to like not think in the box of like 4 players sitting around a table and we're there for 5 hours. Like, if I can get 2 people there for 2 hours or even 1 person for 1 hour, it'll take a little bit of elbow grease and thinking. But, I bet we can figure something out that's fun.
Can you give some examples of how these kind of smaller subgroup sessions spilled over into the broader campaign?
So what it was first was that I didn't even think of like originally it was really just 3 people playing. I had some friends in San Francisco, my friends back home in Philadelphia, and it was all my Portland friends were just burnt out from the last campaign. So it's like, all right, not gonna, bang my head against a wall, give them a break. So like, let me just find some new people. So it was really, I was just like sort of cobbling together, still people I knew and was friends with, but I'm like, you would probably get along. People who didn't know each other, with some like slight exceptions. And so, basically the first 3-person team, my friend Aurora, who plays Tabitha, my friend June, who plays Preston Caviar, and my friend John, who plays October Tengu, the 3 of them, were mostly just, it was very like, I didn't want to write out too much at first. Like, so it's like, let's go on a zany little adventure here and a zany little adventure there. And we'll, you're going to write your backstory for me, but let's play, so it's like, go to the Goblin Compound. Nothing terribly high concept. A lot of abandoned story threads, because I'm like, all right, we don't need this anymore. Like, you guys don't even remember what happened last session. You won't know. But eventually, as one of the core things that happened there was that my friend Aurora, I tried to build these stories and like have it be a collaborative writing experience, even if we're not playing. And so we're like coming up with ideas. I'm like, where is Tabitha, this drow, from? Like, she could drow live underground and, blah, blah, blah. Or they could be on the surface. She's like, I think I would like them underground. And my roommate, Daniel, who was part of that older group, had he was made for like a one-shot for an older group that he wasn't in. But it was a dark elf named Rolo. A really cool character. Daniel's the only person from that old group still like really wanting to play. And I'm like, well, you could be like, do you want to be from the same place as, roommate Daniel's character? She's like, sure, whatever. Like, that sounds fun. And we worked out like a sort of a vague, like description of their relationship. And then it was like, all right, cool. Like, I'm like, well, one of these days, like, I'll get Daniel in on this. So I'm like, let me put this little mention and this little mention of him in there, with just the intention, like, oh, I'll make a little guest appearance. What ended up happening was just like with the scheduling of people, across the East and West Coast is like, that group is like so awesome and so committed every time they get together. Scheduling is a nightmare. And so there was this large sort of gap where I'm like, you know what? Like, they're not doing that. Like, why, rather than just like, again, banging my head against the wall, let me try out some people here locally. And I'll just run some home games. And like, if I like these people and their characters, I'll like have a little second team. And so, through 2 different groups, each one had a player. So that one is my good friend Daniel as Rolo, my friend Brad as Suplex, and then my friend Mason as Munis. Sort of out of the ashes of like 2 different groups that like fell apart, and like, not to spill any drama, but like, wasn't nothing with me too much, but some of it was a little dramatic. I was like, oh no, like, will this person want to play again? It's like, oh great, we just moved past that. You like this is enough to deal with someone being too drunk at a D&D game. And so, it was one of those things where, again, like, it was kind of like messy start. It was a lot of like tangled, a lot of like disconnected things. And, but it was, even though I wanted these very like fleshed out characters, I wasn't going to try and make it like, all right, you got to give me like a 5-page essay, because people are going to be like, check out. It's like, I came here to make TV jokes in your fantasy game. But, we would just sort of like have conversations like, that was funny. Like, what do you think that means about Tabitha? Like, what do you think they thought about that? And sort of work backwards. And then, I don't mind writing out ridiculously long strings of prose. So usually I take I get a list of ideas. I'm like, does this sound like a good thing, idea of your character? Like, yep, I write it out for them in a tale, sort of give them final approval. And so pretty much like once I had gotten these 6 people, split up into 2 teams of like 3, they sort of knew their characters a little intrinsically, just sort of in like the vibe that they want to play them as. We had like a good sort of fleshed out backstories, and that was basically once they were, everybody started, let's say for the sake of simplicity, around like level 3 to 5, because those early levels, I don't care, waste of time. Oh, sorry, were you going to say something? I'd have been going on.
Oh, no, I just wanted to make sure I understood. So everyone ended up kind of starting this campaign at the same time almost.
This was a different, like, separate time. So this was like its own, like, I set like in the in-lore game, like, I sort of had to like work out a timeline. But it was mostly like the first group, they all started pretty much at the same time. And then the second one was actually sort of, in the background being like slowly built. So I was still playing like some distance games, and like they were still sparsely scheduled enough where it was like, all right, like, hey, you from work, like, you want to play a game of D&D? Like, let's give this a try. Give it like a session or 2. It didn't take too long. And then it's like, all right, I'll pull you in. Like, I know this, my roommate Daniel's a cool player. Would you want to try and, sort of just not making any promises, and because I also don't want to be the guy like, you have to audition for my D&D TV show. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of the way I went about it. But, I think a big part of it was just like, again, it's like people don't think about a lot at first, like the interpersonal stuff that comes with this game, because it's like there's a huge difference in the amount of work. Like, I don't care how active your players are. I don't care. Like, DM is always going to do more work. And, you really have to, it's like, if you're running out of a book and you're like, oh, this is like, if someone's being screwy, it's not like they're ruining my grand master plan. Like, cool. But it's like, this campaign, my other 2 ones before this started on a book. And even still, with all that, it's like, when the second one sort of ended with a whiff, it was like devastating. Oh my goodness. So it was just like, it's like, I play this with my friends. I don't want it to be this weird resentment thing. Like, let's make sure, that I have people that I, with my experience of being like, you will be fun to play with, but like figuring out how to get you to the table or XYZ reason, it's like, like, you're not an all the time player. Like, I'll have you in every once in a while. Like, or some people like, not at all. Bye. Bad fit. So it's, just like sort of another thing where it was like, I did, rather than everyone starting at the same time, I guess I took a little more time with it. I feel like I got lucky with the first 3, and then the next ones was kind of like, okay, like, let's just see. And it was awesome. These were all, again, people from Portland, but from different parts of my life. And, now they're all, like, good friends. Like, they have no real reason outside of me to hang out together. And, like, they, like, it's real friendships have, like, sprung up from it. And so, yeah, it did make, like, writing the story, like, ooh, how do I advance the story while I'm still figuring it out? Like, but, it's all make-believe in your head. So you can just be like, whatever, pretend this happened beforehand. Like, it's... Again, just asking people to buy in and suspend disbelief, which is an important part of anything. It's like, I'm doing something crazy here.
I'd love to hear more about how you kind of get people into the story and get that buy-in, even when things happen that they weren't there for, because it really does feel like a big part of the implicit contract in D&D is that you get to see all the important stuff happening. And in these games, inevitably, important stuff is happening that someone else caused.
Exactly. One thing that's nice is that, I guess a hard part of that is like in the beginning, especially when things are disconnected, it's harder because, there are the real life relations that some people have. And like, so my friend that knew on the one team that knew Daniel, like anytime, a little Rolo Vryn reference came up, like a little Daniel reference, it was like, and he knew, but like other people are like, what? But in the time since, there's actually been, there were a few smaller crossovers, like with travel, like when I would go back home to Philadelphia, it's like, let's try and make, we'll do something special because like certain people are here in person. So there would be like, different like crossovers, people coming to Portland. So there would be smaller ones. And then eventually once it was my birthday during 2020 in May. And so it was like, all right, like, let's, I was still on Roll20 at that point. I was like, my main hesitance was like, I don't feel like teaching my local players how to use Roll20. Like, no offense, Roll20. But once I finally got them together, and it was like, because it had been going for like at least a year and a half before there was the real like, big sort of the first big arc ended. And, it was like, let's make it an event. It was my birthday. So I'm like, you have to be nice about it. But, they knew, like, I had explained, like, how it was going to them. Like, yeah, like, so they understood. And so once it was, like, they got to have, like, those crazy battles together where it's like, oh, I've been hearing about your character. Like, we had that little thing. Like, being in this, the episode was called Two of Hearts. It was sort of this big thing where, like, the big bad daddy was revealed. He was revealed to be the wizard Kol Rasa, who was, like, their friend helping them all along. And so the lead up to that was, like, the last sort of separate games they played. I had a lot of, like, sort of buried and nested reveals to sort of, like, make them think, like, I revealed that one person was Tabitha's, previously thought as, like, dead husband who's been helping Daddy. And she was like, oh, this character's been chasing us. I was like, did you guys were surprised by that? They were like, kinda, like, we knew. And I was like, it was obvious from the start. So I was like, oh, boo-hoo. And then, finally getting into the chamber, and they're like, because they're going there to save poor Kol Rasa. Never at any point, this is one of the great things about, like, if you're afraid people will guess you're surprised in D&D. Inexplicably, another drow just following them around, never once questioned, like, like, why is this guy here? I'm not really supposed to be here. Just, and he's, ends up basically killing, murdering Tabitha, ripping her heart out, so then they had to, like, then there's, like, a whole resurrection thing they had to do, a bunch of other stuff, steals her sword. And then, on the other end, there was a Rolo and Suplex were starting a school in an old house that they were given. It was a real party school. So they were having a house party, and basically they wanted to have a house party. And so I just had, I put a few sort of more things into, like, help, like, little, like, hidden things nested in there that I was going to bring back in later to really emotionally devastate people. But it's mostly like, it's just a fun little house party. And then all of a sudden, Daddy's here, reveals himself, this huge thread from Rolo's past where he had this brother that he thought was dead his whole life and caused this, like, awful life for him that he's trying to sort of escape from. Like, turns out he's alive, and now, like, Daddy has him. So it's like, it's like one person I have to steal their sword, the other person I have to steal their long-lost brother. Different priorities. But, with those two things sort of set up, I was like, all right, it's like you guys are in the same town, the same time. It's like, Tabitha's like strolling around town with a crazy chest wound, and like you're walking from the ashes of your ruined house party, and it was like, all right, like let's do this thing. They the sort of appointed place they went to it. That one, because I knew I was now working with a group of like 5 to 6 people. It's took place across 5 sessions. So there was like, a few. I made sure for the most important ones, I'm like, all right, if you need to miss like this one and this one, I'm like, this particular person, you can miss it. I was like, the rest of you have to be here. And it was just like, they like knew. It's like, all right, this is not going to be some like half thing, like where we just like get through it with 2 people. But I made sure that it was very fast paced. It was a little more maybe railroaded, some people might say. I'm always very insecure about whether I'm railroading people, but I try to let people know, I'm like, this is going to be pretty straightforward. I still want you to make decisions in the moment, but just know it's like, you're not going to have like, and here you are in the village. What do you want to do? There's a grandma on the corner of the street. Like, that's probably, you're not going to have a chance to do that. So, these are split second sort of choices that you should be thinking about. And it just, there's a few different ideas. I'll probably get more into them later, but like, some very fast paced skill challenges, 2-part boss battles, taking people, basically at the end of this one, with the great villain Daddy revealed as their friend, this experiment that he's been doing on Tabitha and Rolo's lineage this whole time, like, you will be my vessel for great power, that sort of a deal. Basically caused the end of the universe. He sort of messed with a power inside Rolo that was, a little more than he like knew like that he had messed with, and basically ripped a black hole in the center of the universe that was caused by, enormous grief. I had a grief skill challenge in the middle of the battle. That was great, and everybody, I had like people crying. It was just like a totally hopeless battle. Where it's like, oh, and I told them before, I'm like, I'm going to kill all of you. Like, don't think that this is a fun thing where like, oh, he fell unconscious and got back up. After like, the whole universe goes to white, I had to, just like the little intro I did there, I had written out like the description of the entire universe. Like, I knew that basically it's like you guys aren't getting out of this. But the sort of story after that, like picking up on like a thread from Suplex's thing where, time travel is like the worst thing you can introduce into role-playing games, because it's just like, oh, it's almost never a satisfying thing when you have it as like a regular mechanic. And then when you do just use it as a story thing, as I know from my first campaign, it's like, there's a lot of funny stuff that you can do, but it just becomes like ridiculous to reconcile. But, there was this little element of like, he's a divination wizard, sort of time traveling things in his past. It was, I basically played into like giving him like one chance. It's like, oh, you're at the edge of reality. You're at the like center of like this black hole thing, and like you were sort of saved in this little pocket. Like, all right, like you're a disgusting drunk 13-year-old goblin. Looks like you're the last chance, like, and basically gave like this one. I mean, everyone there, I was like, you're all still dead. I was like, so you have to see if this works, and did a skill challenge for like, going through his own past to sort of like go back and sort of like stop what happened. Just this very emotional thing where everyone's like, we're back together again, and fucking like, it was like so obviously like the last boss battle, and that created like an instant like bond and foundation for the rest of it.
So the whole time leading up to this arc, they didn't know what was happening with the other team. They just kind of knew that when the 2 parties got together, there would be high stakes, but they didn't necessarily know they'd be this high.
There would be certain things, like, there were certain things that would happen in the background, like early on when I sort of got the Rolo team together for the first time. I was like, I wanted to be like sort of a fun thing, like, because it was like, all right, the first official outing, and it ended up with them disintegrating through. I was like, I tried to have all these little backups. I'm like, I'm gonna have like the patriarch of this evil, sort of drow nation like show up, and they'll be like, ha ha ha. There'll be a big fight, and then he'll leave. He's got 98 ways to teleport. Like, it'll be fine. Legendary resistance. And I'm going through it. He's like down to like 76 health. I'm like, ooh, I should be careful. Rolo, for circumstances we won't bother to get into, was a level 11 character starting out. He was from an earlier campaign. It was crazy balancing those fights for a while. But it was interesting because you have a level 5 goblin and a level 11 sorcerer. And they still made it through. The sorcerer almost died more than the level 5 goblin. It was great. But he ended up disintegrating him. And I was like, they worked together to where I was like, I disintegrated. I'm like, oh, well, I passed my dexterity saving throw. Too bad. The divination wizard uses his portent. And I'm like, what? And he's like, he had like a 2. He's like, I make it a 2. I'm like, oh, it failed. I'm like, well, whatever. I've got a legendary resistance. I did not. I gave him 2 instead of 3. And it was one of those times where I had to make a decision. I'm like, I don't remember what I intended to do with this. I was like, but on this stat sheet, it says he is 0 out of 2. I'm like, I could fudge this. I was like, or I could just give it to them. And I was like, they like totally work together to like zing me back and forth with like divination, disintegration, like combo attack. I'm like, I gotta give it to them. Like, and so they, within the first official battle, the like king of this nation they're supposed to be going against, even with this shadowy other figure like behind him pulling the strings, they just got turned to dust. I'm like, oh no. And so from that point, the next team did not necessarily see oh, they didn't like, I think there was like, hear ye, like, I would make mentions of like news and stuff like that because it'd be big events. But what happened to that was just that, like, I was like, okay, we're going to have this, like, slow simmering build up to war. It's like, well, now it's, like, just going to get all pulled together. That's why it was like, all right, basically, the big bad behind him is like, well, I've got to speed up my plan. And that's why I totally killed Tabitha. So she didn't know. It's like, well, them sort of escalating this war thing has now caused this thing where it's like, you're just like the last adventure they played was like them larking around, like drinking margaritas and doing drugs. And then like the next one's like, oh, the old man friend that you have is lost in a cave. Like, you should go help him. And I'm like murdering her. Like, we hadn't even played in like 8 months. It was totally out of left field, but they loved it. But yeah, it was just this like sort of figuring out what those unintended consequences are. And then there was also other like, this escalation of war, like in that same one where it was like, okay, the major city that like you guys usually go into, like we're going full, like, we're getting besieged by this grand patriarchy. Like, there's all these sort of unintended ones that they don't necessarily like know were from that. Versus like some other stuff where like, I certainly with like Suplex's character and a lot of those sort of time travel who's-y what's-its that went on there, it was like, those were at least a little clearer to be like, oh, if I hadn't done that or I hadn't done that, like, so it differs depending on what it is, but I think at this point it's pretty clear in the sort of like grand picture of stuff, like where things have sort of led, I hope.
And when the players from like the different parties get to interact with each other, do they treat each other as fully fledged PCs, or is there a little more sense of, oh, these are almost NPCs, I don't have a bond with them, they're maybe a little more expendable?
Oh no, nothing like that at all. It's great. It's like so great how like people like, and some characters are very like rascally and do like crazy things that are like very a lot of ethical gray areas, as always. But yeah, I mean, I think it's what's nice is like something that I've also tried to do is like, since the sort of groups have combined, like they have these things like the bar and the school that are these hubs. And so now there's sort of this sort of implied relationship that they have where it's like, even if they haven't gone on a ton of adventures yet, it's like, well, you guys are all hanging out at the Fajita Roundup. So you maybe not have like, gone out and killed a wizard with this guy, but like, you're friends with his friends and you go get drinks and like, and so there's really like two combinations of like two people that haven't, like they've played together, but they haven't had like a sort of a small group like experience with yet. And yet, like, even it's like especially because like we have stuff like group chats and whatnot, there is sort of this like a little bit of a meta crossover. And, people always talk about metagaming as if it's like the worst thing on the planet. Like, I actually think with like relational stuff, like, it's pretty great the way that it informs it and like the way that things are different, blow up their spot a little bit. But, yeah, Tabitha and Preston's players, they're like my childhood friends from high school. They used to date. And, you know, they are, like, obviously still friends and, like, have had a great dynamic for that sort of thing. But, like, things like that, like, it's so obvious in the little piece of them that they bring to these characters, like, where that dynamic sort of, like, that sort of, like, rolling eye disapproval of, like, you know, Preston's, like, you know, wild antics. It's like I've seen that before, you know, and always in good fun, you know, and nobody's, like, not that people don't, you know, they don't get competitive. They definitely get that thing where, like, they want to, like, ooh, I want this to, you know, succeed, you know, I like, or, you know, taking failure with, like, grace, where it's like, you know, there was a little sort of a potential love plot, a sexy orc cowboy that I put in there for Rollo. And I was even like, does Rollo want a boyfriend? I made it very, I was like, I want, there needs to be some romance in here. And, like, he rolled, like, awful, like, successive 1s and 2s. And he's a sorcerer. He has, like, he's level, like, 14 at this point. He's insane charisma. And just 1s and 2s and 1s and 2s. And it's like, you know, they're joking, like, I'm trying to flirt. And I'm, like, farting and, like, you know, totally juvenile. But, like, it was this hilarious thing of, like, well, that, you know, and it's like, well, I got to go with the rolls. He's like, cool. Yeah, you guys are great, I guess. Like, you know, and still has his role in the story. But, like, that romance part is pretty done. But then that literally, like, later in that episode, there was a different, you know, a sort of sexy Russian different angel man. He's not dead of dick issues. And Misha. And, like, all of a sudden, he's, you know, like, Rollo's like, I really like Misha. Like, ooh. And I'm like, you know, I absolutely was not considering this, but, like, new crush, Misha. And it's like, you know, we haven't gotten too much other than some little, like, you know, barroom flirting between Misha and Rollo, but, like, we all know what it's gonna be. And like, you know, the ideas that have come out of that, I'm like, oh, like, this is so much better than the sexy orc cowboy man. Like, you know, there's plenty of sexy orcs out there, you know, but this is, like, it was just one of those great things of, like, natural ones and, like, terrible fart jokes. And, like, you know, I have a million things planned for this, like, you know, out of those ashes, those stinky ashes, has risen, like, a way better, like, pairing, you know, just based off of, again, like, my players' choice and their wants. And, you know, not being afraid to, like, you know, yeah, like, we try to keep the real, like, decisions, like, in the game, but, like, oh, like, tell me your ideas, guys. Like, I go through and I check with people frequently. I'm like, what did you like? What didn't you like? What do you want to see more of? And that's, like, you know, another thing, like, when people get afraid that, like, they're going to take my story totally off path. If you ask people what they want and then, you know, without making it too obvious, you give it to them, like, you know, keep a little element of surprise in there so they don't see it coming. But, like, you know, people won't, like, generally be too crazy about being like, no, I actually killed that grandma. I will say that Rollo did stab Suplex's mom, Zolda, after they freed her from jail. And that was a little bit of a weird moment. But we figured, the next game, it was like, well, I have to hate Rollo now because you stabbed my mom I just freed from jail. And I was like, before the next game we played, I'm like, all right, I don't want to tell anybody what to do, but we have to resolve the mom stabbing. I was like, because I don't know how we got to the mom stabbing. And Daniel was like, I also don't know how I got to the mom stabbing. I was like, okay. You know, it was like, this was during the attack, and there's, like, bombs and everything blowing up. It's like, sorry I stabbed your mom. It's like, okay. And we moved on. It's, you know, another one of those great, like, sort of cross meta and reality things where it's like, you know, if we just can suspend disbelief and be nice to each other, like, you know, who cares what happens? Like, all the different sort of, like, I don't know how to deal with this. It's like, everyone will just be like, we don't care, and you'll just move right on. It's great. It's the easiest.
This is such a wildly different philosophy than some of the people we've talked to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to juggle, and it's like, I love my friends, and it's, you know, I know that I, in my own way, can be so very one-minded about this, obviously. And so I try to give them a lot of grace, and, like, especially, like, lately, it's like, oh, this year is, like, so overstimulating, and it's, like, hard to really tell people to, like, come and spend 3 hours with me when you just want to, like, sit and not process anything. And so, you know, there's a lot of, like, emotional work that I've done over the years just in my life where it's like, you know, you really want this thing and you can't take this as a rejection when people aren't around and all. You just have to sort of, like, really go with the flow. And, you know, it's chaotic. That's why it's taking freaking 5 years, it's so long. It's like, I'm dying to finish this, not just to rush it, but to like, get to like the end, and I will. But I would say like, the campaign before this where everybody got burnt out, that was, a year and a half length. They got from like level 1 to level like 18, I think, by the end. Like, most things die out by 10. The first campaign ended a natural end at, I think they were like level 11. That one got so far, and I got it in a really good amount of time, but everyone got burnt out, and it died out at the end. So it's like, look what that got me. So it's definitely one of those things where it's like, you do got to kind of like learn to just deal with like disappointment. Things, you'll have all these cool things planned, and like, again, like I was talking on our break about sort of a beach house game that I tried to do, and there's a lot of my stuff has technology involved now, and I just didn't think, I'm like, the beach house upload speeds were not something that I was factoring into my plan when I was testing all of this stuff out, and it was I'm gonna finish it later. The thing that didn't happen, but I just had to be like, we can play, like, we were already partway through it when these realizations were happening. I'm like, this is supposed to be sort of a parallel, like, an 8-person group split into like 2 groups of 4, like battling at the same time. And it was like, all right, well, we can have one of the groups do it now, and then when we have time later, we'll just go back and do the other thing, and we'll do the second half. Like, it's either that or like what I storm around and cry, because it's, that is, when you follow the Reddits, sometimes that's what people do. I've certainly done it myself a few times. But yeah, it lends a lot to the longevity of it. It's like, I'm not going to get to this maybe when I want to, but I will get to it.
So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the mechanics you use in these sessions with fewer players. We were talking earlier offline, and you mentioned something about a duel system.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that one's fun. So basically, one of the things, because I try to make these these games like a TV show or like a little sort of a movie or an anime, I always love to say, there's a lot, like, describing things happening in battle in motion, like, you can describe Magic Missile as crazily as you want. Like, when there's like 3 minutes in between the next thing that happens, battle, all this flowery description sort of being truncated over and over again. It's hard to see it as like a whole picture. And, these characters are all like so crazy, and they're so overpowered, which is why I make monstrous NPCs. The numbers are just definitely not the bounded accuracy, I think they call that. That's out the window. But the duel system, in effect, is just really just, it's basically like the skill challenge idea. But this is sort of mainly based, it's supposed to be in the midst of battle, and it's a lot of like contested roles. So, for instance, my most successful use of this was that October Tengu, he's a monk, an air guardian, he has sort of a team avatar thing going on. It's a custom subclass. He's got a lot of Rasengans and Chidoris and whatnot. But so, this was after like our big crossover, and I was like, I want to get into like, episodic, like you get to be the main character now. Like, everybody gets to be like the main character. This was October's sort of thing. So I'm like, all right, we got to go, his first, when we were creating his character, he's like, I want to be like One Punch Man. I'm like, I love that. You can't be One Punch Man, because then you'll kill everything. It's not going to work. I was like, so that's how we worked out, a lot of like, he hasn't even seen Naruto. It's great, because like all of my like little ideas that are just like dumb references seem like, like, Jake, you created that. I'm like, not really. But so this was like, I was like, this has to be the distillation of like overly anime stuff. So they're going into this like deserted island to sort of like, they've gathered their team avatar. It's like, finally we're a full crew, and the master Shu is like, we got to go like do a thing. I've been hearing about some weird cult stuff. Like, let's go investigate. We got to like make a name for ourselves. And then, by the end of that, they're, in this underground secret government facility. There's the map I used was just a sort of a isometric, like, it was the Evangelion cage for Evangelion Unit 1 inside of there. And so obviously I didn't call it an Eva. I gave it, I called it an Imperial Titan. It's like, because this world is very like, there's a lot of, modern like sort of magitech stuff. It's still very high fantasy, like, it's just people are just like, hey, like, yeah, we do, like, some people have guns, not everybody, but we still really like swords because they're like, we haven't gotten rid of swords, we still have swords. Of course, anything, time you put something modern in fantasy games and stuff like this, it's like, you have to be careful because, like, for instance, having guns as a weapon in D&D, a gun shooting somebody is, like, probably should do way more damage than, like, a dagger stabbing somebody. But with the way that you have to balance these games, like, the way the numbers need to work out will never make, like, a gun feel like it does that. It's like, so how do you get something in there like that other than just being like, here's a really disappointing, like, low dice, like, this is my Evangelion, it does 2d10 damage when it punches you. Like, okay. And so, rather than having it be a battle against that Evangelion, it was I worked in a story thread from that campaign that never finished. I'm like, there was an evil team avatar that was the inspiration for me making this for that one. I was like, I'm like, let's finally connect this old thing. And so now, this group of supervillains that's been in jail for a while are stealing this robot because we're going to free all my other friends, jerks. And we're going to fight on top of this Ava. So it was this thing where, you have all these monks fighting and everybody's doing a lot of flurry of blows. But basically it was kind of almost like a lair action. I usually will only do them like maybe once every other round or something like that. But basically, the leader of the cult and like, the main character October would clash. And then, basically just like you would with a skill challenge where it's like, you make a stealth roll. Tell me how you sneak. I instead open it up to rather like being like, here's all your abilities. You're a lightning monk. Like, you have this, and this spell that does a very specific thing. We don't care about the rules, though. Do you want to do, like, a hyper lightning punch where you do, do you want to, if you succeeded with natural 20s on this, do you want to do a one-punch man and you explode him on, like, that? Like, be super imaginative. We're not thinking about resources here. We're just contesting roles. And so, basically it's just a character. The way I've done it now is that basically your like main melee stat plus a proficiency bonus, and then your main like magic stat. So like dexterity would be his dual melee roll, and wisdom would be his like dual magic roll. But it's like, all right, like, so do you want to, like, I want to do a cool punch combo, and that's where we just it doesn't matter how wacky it is, doesn't matter the rules. And at the end, you just tabulate how many successes versus how many failures, and then I will have sort of an effects thing at the end there. Sometimes it's as simple as just like, you get advantage on your next thing. Other times there are and usually it's both, large story implications as to like, it's like, did you manage to like fight him back enough time? Like, this is basically like something with that big old robot they're stealing is going to change. And it just creates this sort of moment to be like really creative and not worry about the rules in battle, where by definition you have to really like crunch those rules. Cause like, it's like, that's why they made Final Fantasy on a, Super Nintendo. Cause like, oh, we can just animate what it looks like. The computer does the numbers and you can just imagine it, but it's like, obviously you're never really imagining that much with that stuff as much as it has inspired all this. So it's a really cool thing. People like responded to it like really well. It's way more than like a skill challenge of like, you're running down the street, athletics check. Like, how do you run down the street? They have a lot more cool ideas about how they lightning punch someone, or how they, their sword combos. These are people who, like me, have watched a lot of TV, played a lot of video games. And I feel like it's allowed them to make a little bit more of a connection between like, the like really awesome, like, making that anime in your head rather than like waiting for someone to make it for you. And so, yeah. And then the best thing is like you get all that sort of like action and story, and it's like in 2 minutes. Like, it's like a 2-minute thing. Move on. So that's my idea there.
First off, wow, that sounds incredibly fun.
It went a lot of places.
Second off, you mentioned that this comes off as really cinematic, and one other thing that you've told me about your games that sounds very cool is your use of cinematic cutscenes.
Yes, this is one of those great examples of me doing too much, but it's really fun, and I've only really recently started doing it. But so big shout out. I probably maybe even already said it, but I'll say it as many times as I want to. Ryan Hamill, he is a buddy of mine through making. Basically, I've been commissioning line art for first like player characters. Actually, first it was just NPCs. Because I wanted these NPCs to be like really bright and pop, like, it's fun to like have people imagine what the character is, but I think when I had a very like rich idea of who this character is, I wanted to really like let him know and like have it's like how people say it's like I'm putting a face to the name, and the art that he has made, Ryan Hamill, at Ham Illustration on Instagram. For me, he's drawn over like 100 characters for me at this point. Way too generous with his rates with me. I don't like he deserves the world. So don't any of you ask for a discount. No. But it's I'll basically have like 3 characters. I got some way more expensive like big 8x10 art by of like Tabitha Preston in October, just as like a commemoration because I'd never commissioned anything before. And it was just an awesome feeling to see these characters working with, again, the players. Like, give me this idea. Like, every time I do this, I'm like, I need you to work with me on what this is going to look like, so that like you're in there. And so Ryan Hamill from there, Filibuster Frog was the first artist I worked with, another amazing artist. But Ryan by far has like, I think he just understands like the feeling of all of these characters, sort of the very cartoonish, very sort of anime inspired nature of them. And so thankfully I have this huge library of like amazing art of like the cutest, coolest characters ever. And I usually just use them for tokens and stuff. And like I would show them to the players, like, here's your character, here's like your best bud. And it was just great. They're like, this is cool. I've over the course of the pandemic taught myself a little coding, extremely rudimentary JavaScript, very bad at it. But there is this program called RenPy, RENPY, where using basic Python, it's a freeware piece of software. I was just like looking it up. I love Disgaea is another favorite video game of mine. Their cutscenes are done in visual novel styles. A ton of different RPGs have done that. And like even with just like a single sprite of a character, through this art that I have from Ryan, like the way that he has drawn it is always like so expressive. And like versatile in a weird way, like the things that I can do just by like inching it around with like very bad coding skills. I've created just these little like cutscenes. What I generally try to use them for, because it's important. Like I don't want to be putting like words in my players' mouths as their characters. There are some where maybe it'll be like a dream or a vision, where it's like, like you're just sitting there, you're not gonna say something, whatever. It's just another character talking to you. Maybe we'll have that have a player in there. But for the most part, what I've tried to use them for is like just NPC on NPC interactions, because just sort of like with the real life friend group and everything, it's like the way that people interact now, the way their characters, each character has like a little family basically. It's like cute, we're all like weird queers and like, we all know the value of a found family and everything like that. And the way that's like reflected in it is awesome. And the way that like, friends of friends like now have like weird, relationships with each other. It's like super cute. But when I'm trying to be 2 NPCs at once talking to each other, playing like, what did you do? Nothing, how about you? Like, it's weird. There's no good way to do it. Let alone, like, the king, the Knights of the Round Table, I've got 12 people having a conversation, like, oh no. And so basically what this visual novel software lets me do is, take 2 NPCs and let them have, like, a really, like, rich conversation with each other, trying to make it really zany and goofy and funny. I've tried to, not so much in the literal voice that I do for the characters, though some of them I have some pretty great voices, but like the, just the way that they talk and the way they speak, I try to make pretty distinct characters. And so even without voice acting over these visual novel cutscenes, I found so far, it's like, I've been able to really like capture the essence of this character, work out some more like long form like ideas of like their thoughts and feelings, and sort of set up adventures. Usually what I'll do them use them for so far is introductions. So for instance, Suplex will pretty soon be starting an adventure where they have to go back to his home country to get, his mom Zolda and her sister that they sort of picked up recently.
So Zelda survived the stabbing.
She did. So yeah, Zolda survived the stabbing, and then to make up for it, Rollo hired her as the headmistress of the Vryn Academy of Mystical Arts. So, she got a paying job out of it. She loves to... Zolda's the weird voice. I have this weird wizard woman voice, and I do it too much. I'm so sorry. But I talk to myself in that voice so much now. She's unfortunately the best NPC I've ever created, and I've become her in my mind. But... I always try to, just as with my players, they try to put a piece of themselves in their characters. I really try to put a piece of myself into each NPC. And, another great thing about having all my close friends here is, they know me and they know my personal story and the things in my life that have affected me. And so, the story, basically, that was another time I checked in with Suplex. I'm like, what do you like about your story? He's like, I love Zolda. I want more Zolda. So I'm like, cool. I'm like, all right, time to make a big story for Zolda. She's got, 2 sisters. They've got this awful relationship. Why? They were war criminals. They've killed children. I have to came up with all these, details for them. It's like, but now how do I, actually express this? And I've hinted and done stuff like that, but, leading somebody into that conversation, you can be like, telling them what question to ask. But in this one, instead, I created a scene where it's Zolda and her sister Ursula. They're at the Fajita Roundup. It's like a faculty party to celebrate the opening of the school. Because she's gone and found her estranged sister to hire her as the head of conjuration. And now, rather than just doing a back and forth weird conversation, they're getting it Zolda's just trying to be pretend nothing's wrong. All that stuff that real siblings kind of do when they're forced together. There's this pushback. They're still having all these weird quirks of slipping in these jokes. They make a lot of nicknames. It's just a lot of layered stuff in a 4-minute interaction, scored to music. And at the end of it, you've learned something about the sisters in their story, that they are war criminals. And now you really know the real emotional core of it, which is siblings who had to clearly had terrible experiences together, but clearly it's have been apart for so long and have their own lives, but have chosen to be around each other, and it's what's going on. You have this idea certainly from people's own lives who have the experiences like that. It's there's crazy love and pain and everything in this in a way that I hope reflects how much I appreciate my players have invested in themselves in it. It's I want to match the thought that you put into this and let you know that as much of me is in this as you are. And so it helps with that.
That's beautiful. And we will try to find some way to share with listeners maybe some snippet or even some still from one of these cutscenes. I realize that talking about, visual art on a podcast might not be the best call. Jake, before we start to head towards wrapping up, I would like to understand the dick-based fatal injuries that befell your Angel Man.
Yes. Oh, so... we were a group of monsters, much like the Monster Bros now, full circle. So I was a sort of a winged Angel Man, more like Angel from X-Man. And we were...
I was imagining Angel from Buffy, so actually that's better.
Oh, I do. I had a crush on Angel from Buffy until I met my stepdad, who looks like him. Done. Thanks, Mike. Just kidding. But anyway, so Angel Man and party go up against this massive sort of Final Fantasy demon wall, and clearly that's the DM saying no, you guys don't go here, go back, and we don't take the hint. We're fighting the giant demon wall, and it was one of those things that, and this was after I died. I was one of the many casualties where it was a campaign reset. It was you guys get teleported to a white room, and there's a cryptic angel woman speaking weird things, and our poor DM had to go over and completely like, it's like, all right, these numbskulls, like I put too much effort into this, like, a great example of a pain that has been inflicted upon me since. I've paid my dues. But we were fighting this demon wall, and there were very tendrily sort of mouths like reaching off of it to bite me. And in my mind, I'd been thinking of them visually as snakes. And I was like, I check for snakes. He's like, what? And I like roll for it. And it's one of those funny haha D&D, like, you said you check for snakes. I rolled it was a natural 10 or, the max roll. And of course I found snakes. And so I'm stomping the snakes. I'm killing the snakes. I start rolling natural ones. I do like splits. The snakes are biting me. I try to get out of it. I roll like another natural run, and it's the junk. It caved in. So I was gravitationally pulled into the earth dickward, while being just savagely bitten by a swarm of snakes, summoned from my mind's eye, basically. And that was my first D&D character death. It's in retrospect, it's no wonder that I'm so needlessly elaborate, but clearly it had a huge effect on me.
Clearly. Okay, well, that's fucking horrifying. Other than the experience of a dear friend narrating you being sucked into hell dick first, what are some media that you were consuming or that you were reading or listening to while you were preparing for this current campaign?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's insane. So I love Naruto so much. I'm a shameless Naruto fan. I know it's shown in anime, and there's like literally 50% of it is not even needed to understand the story. It's insane. Total filler magnet. But it hits those emotional notes so hard. So I have homebrew, like story moments totally that I'm just like, that I've like, made my own, but like totally plagiarized. I love it, and I love that show. It's great. One that is truly like really my favorite show ever is Evangelion. And aside from literally having a map with it on there, like I tried, because I love that show, it like means a lot to me, way too much. I really have avoided trying to put anything overt in there. That was kind of like, this is special. I'm just going to put it in there. That's something that just like the idea of like that emotional, like, media and something that like on its surface is like angels and robots fighting, like, but having this huge insane emotional core to it. That's something that I've tried to really like bring to my games. I can't even, there's too many spoilers. I know people are listening to this. I'm going to get them so bad with my Evangelion stuff. Mob Psycho 100, another anime. I think it's like the positive side of like emotion, so the mirror entity of Evangelion. You have to watch that show. Rolo has this transformation he goes through. I created a stress system where like damage sort of builds up to 100, and then like a transformation happens. It exhausts him. It is one of the most like weird, intricate like homebrew I've ever made, and the way that it worked out is like so perfect. It's just a sort of a random damage thing, and narratively it always happens when like it's needed most. It's amazing. Some other quick ones: Trading Places, the movie starring Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy and Jamie Lee Curtis. I'm still in the middle of a Preston Caviar themed. His whole background is like basically one homage to that, and they're in the undersea city of Ichthadelphia, held within a giant like jellyfish, and it's all male prostitution, drugs, crime. It's amazing. Trading Places is the best movie ever, except for the weird blackface part. I'm sorry. Stevie Nicks Fajita Roundup, that SNL skit. Oh God, I love it. And then this is I'll have this be my last one. It's an actual sort of a D&D story. I don't know if anyone's mentioned this before, but Tales of an Industrious Rogue. I saw it on like a 1D4chan or something or other. I don't know. I don't go on those websites, but Tales of an Industrious Rogue. You should be able to find it somewhere. It is this guy's recounting of his own campaign. It was a Pathfinder campaign. They're like from Spain, so it's like translated into English. He's like apologizing for his like translation, and it's like the most insane and wild. I'm like, I don't know how I would describe this story in my own language, but I remember reading that and that inspiring me for just sort of the wild, zany left turns that you can, especially when you create things like a bar or a school, or in this case, a salt mining camp is what in the Industrious Rogue happens. Create like a place for people to gather. The way that the story can just sort of spindle out of control and become something way bigger. It's just amazing. But yeah, Tales of an Industrious Rogue. It's the best. I handed that to my players at one point. I was like, read this. So I was like, this is, you don't have to do this stuff. I was like, but this is how I want you to think about that. And it totally changed everything.
I absolutely love that. I did find a link to it, and I will be reading it.
There you go.
Last thing, you've kind of done this throughout our conversation, which has been incredibly helpful. Are there any resources, tools, artists, anything like that you'd just like to shamelessly plug?
Oh, heck yeah. Once again, Ryan Hamill, Ham Illustration. He's the best. There is also Filibuster Frog is another great artist. And then, oh my God, the dearest artist, Amanda R. Otten. It's spelled on Instagram. It looks like Amanda Rotten, which is hilarious because she's the least rotten person on planet Earth. She's amazing. She draws a lot of D&D characters. It was sort of a commemorative, like our sort of post-COVID, like you guys are level 12 now. I always like have Ryan design them first, and then I'm like, here, like draw, like, it's this awesome thing getting to see these characters back like through different artists, and Ryan, Filibuster Frog, Amanda, like they are so amazing. So Ham Illustration, Amanda Rotten, and Filibuster Frog on Instagram. You should be able to find all of them. There is Foundry VTT, Virtual Tabletop, that's short for, of course. This is the one thing I'll say. If you're a beginner, there are probably other better things for you to start on. But I'm in a very high level campaign that involves like a lot of weird homebrew and a lot of like, going in between in person and like, mixed online and stuff like that. So it allows a great degree of automation and complexity. So if you're ready to like dedicate some like real technical figuring it out, like, there's some pretty amazing things you can do for that. But, watch some YouTube videos on it first. Renpy for visual novels. And then, I got to give a shout out to Reddit, our battle maps. I used to make all my maps, I made some good ones. I don't make any maps as good as Reddit, the people on our battle maps. The amount of my life that I have back from that, I think like probably I would have died by now if I was still making my own maps. So yes, I'm trying to think. And then of course I should just thank my players, Aurora, June, John, Daniel, Brad, Mason, are 6 of the most amazing people ever. My original players, Lonnie, Jackson, David, Zach, Travis, Frank, Josh, they're all my best friends in the world, and like they have made it's like all of the zaniness, every time I've ever been mad at them or loved them or everything like that, like everything I know about them has like gone into this. And so that's the only reason I care like so much about talking about it, is like it is entirely made up of like the most amazing people in the world. And that's before like I ever touch any of it. And so I love them all very much.
That's absolutely beautiful. Jake, it's been a pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you. I'm literally so grateful. It was awesome.
That's all for this week. Thanks, Jake, for taking the time to chat with us about your campaign.
I've been Jake behind the mic, no relation.
I'm Production Master Riley, no relation.
And the Melting Ice Cap is about to release an Ancient Kraken.
Join us next week when we chat about a very fun microgame called Radical Catgirl Anarchy.
For more on the show, including links to all our social media, visit foldedfrequencies.com/campaign spotlight.